To go on to the next item on our agenda. We're under second reading of ordinances, of which there are none. We're then on to public hearings. Item number 27 is a public hearing to consider the CIP, which is
Mr. Mayor, if I may, I'm sorry for the interruption, but it's a continuation of the hearing from the special session earlier.
Thank you for reminding me. Thank you very much. So the hearing at the beginning of our evening in a special meeting, I'll call that out again. That was a public hearing considering whether to authorize a general plan amendment process with regard to the property commonly known as 19820 Homestead Road in Cupertino. And so I believe we had left it off with comments from Councilmember Willie. Councilmember Willie, did you want to continue with your comments at this time? And one more thing on that. I believe, and correct me, Madam City Clerk, if I'm not correct on this, I believe that the motion on the table was to pass the recommended action, which was to conduct the public hearing and determine whether to authorize the project. Is that correct? Did we place a motion on the table, or have we not placed the motion on the table yet?
Yes, that is correct, Mayor. Vice Mayor moved and Councilmember Way seconded.
Okay, thank you, Madam City Clerk. And thank you for your tolerance, my colleague, Councilmember Willie. You have the floor.
Yeah, so where I left off was simply saying that when we're going to do infill and put it into an existing neighborhood, that we really have to consider the rules that are in place for that neighborhood, and that how those would be impacted by this other development. Now, within the development, within the new development, you know, the impacts upon the houses that are in that development can be whatever we do with the PRAS type of designation. But it's, in my view, it's very unfair to long-term families that wind up with something being done right next door and it doesn't hold the character. Well, by all means, you can go from 1 story to 2 story right next to you. That's fine, as long as you adhere to the rules for that current zoning designation. But then within that new development, oh yeah, no problem. There's HOA developments with 0 lot lines, and the people that then buy those are buying them with those requirements that are in effect. And so that's where I'll leave off. I think this is going to be a good project. I do think that the developer is going to need to pay close attention to the impact on those surrounding houses, which to some extent have already been done. The shadowing and things of that nature, the setbacks. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Willie. Next, we have Councilmember Moore.
Okay, thank you. One of the things that I appreciate about this particular plan is when I look at the ADU units, they have yard space. And I'm going to assume that when this comes back, should it come back to the city, that is going to be an element of the project which will be maintained. Because if those are fairly small units, but it's really nice to see that they're having some area there. Now, with regards to the step back that we had on the upper floor, and that was to accommodate concern for well, not just privacy, but that they had solar panels on the roof, and we wanted to make sure that we weren't going to hurt the efficiency that they had there. With regards to our shadow study, my preference, and I'll bring this up probably as we close out the meeting, my preference would be that we would be following something like the Berkeley shadow study, and which would go to my recollection, they look at a number of hours before sunset, rather than 4 o'clock specifically, which might end up with a different result. And so I'll bring that up at another time. But And it looks like for the questions about privacy when they come back, it'll come back to the Planning Commission that they can work with the concerns about the neighbor to make sure, I think it was like a flag-shaped lot in the rear to make sure that their privacy concerns are addressed. But with regards to trees, I do understand that there was a comment about having, if you were to choose something that was going to actually negatively impact the neighbor while trying to do privacy, and that was with regards to the house, the structures in the southeast corner. I would also want to make sure that the trees that are shown in the schematic now in the northeast corner aren't such that they also go and shadow the solar panels there. So we want to make sure that that is taken care of. And I do appreciate the volunteering to develop the sidewalk and the front of the lot. And I think that staff's done a really good job making improvements to the view from Homestead with the vegetation. And it really shows a clear effort to make improvements and work with the city to have a good project here. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Moore. All right, I echo the sentiments that have been expressed. I also believe that the resident that spoke about privacy options on the foliage, we should respect the effects upon the neighbors. I know that there is immediate surrounding by Sunnyvale residents, and so perhaps staff would like to speak to that with regard to what our notice requirements do with regard to reaching out to our neighbors in bordering jurisdictions.
Thank you, Mayor. We would still follow the same notice requirements as if they were part of the city. So, if the noticing, for example, is 300 feet radius around the property, regardless if it's in another jurisdiction, those neighbors would be noticed as well.
Yeah, I think that you and the director and the applicant are all on your own notice that there is an appetite from the community as well as council to ensure that there is a fit within the neighborhood, that there is cohesiveness and harmony with regard not just to the design and aesthetic, but also mechanics of how maintenance occurs. And obviously we're not going to put large palm fronds that fall down into neighbors' yards and imperil the safety of people. But just along those lines, just to make sure that we're thinking about the type of privacy vegetation that can go in a fashion that's non-intrusive, or at least as intrusive as non-intrusive as non-intrusive as possible. So thanks very much. Vice Mayor Chow, you have your hand up.
So certainly I support this project. However, we will be approving a general plan amendment. And once the amendment is approved, in case the project, the site change hands, would the next developer be able to follow the exact same site plan? And there might be a streamlined approval. And then the project might be not what we think. So I would like to see a general plan amendment that include the objective standards. So I wrote something down. I would like to see the general plan amendment that include the objective standards for all physical dimensions, the windows and the shieldings. My PC went black for some reason.
Vice Mayor Chow, you might need to reset your computer.
Something happened to my computer. So, but you can hear me. Something very strange happened to my computer. Everything is very big. So the general plan authorization should include objective standards for all physical dimensions, windows, balconies, which they may or may not have, and shieldings, and for not only between this site and the neighboring property and the homestead, and also if the site is subdivided into smaller parcels, what would be the setback height between those parcels needs to be clearly defined. In case the project change hands or any of the parcel is sold separately, a different developer will be able to follow the exact same standard rather than propose something that might not follow the same things we don't have a standard in place. So that's what I'm asking for. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Chow. Next, we have Councilmember Moore. Councilmember Moore.
Okay, the vice mayor kind of reminded me of something, and that's we have the potential of SB 9 passing through. And when I was asking about the postage stamp lots, which are for each of the structures, is that something that we can expect to see moving forward? Because the way it was previously subdivided, you had 4 lots plus the center lot for the kind of like the roadway access easement in an ingress egress easement. And then during that meeting, it was decided that that was going to actually be incorporated into the 4 lots and that it would not be a 5th lot. And it was my understanding at that time, it was that was to avoid the tentative subdivision map for 5 lots or more, that's what they were trying to do. But now when I look at the project, it seems to be, to me, that you're at the 5 lot point. So they would need a tentative subdivision map coming forward. That's a question. But the second part is, do we have a reasonable expectation that we're going to see, if we agree to this, that we're going to see postage stamp lots, which are, essentially the dimension of the structure. And I'm going to assume that that's because they want to potentially sell those as townhouses moving forward. And was that the intention? And I just want to know that because I'm concerned that they would potentially, if SB 9 passed, they'd have a ministerial by right approval to subdivide those postage stamp lots. And if it is just a postage stamp, I'm good with that because there's less kind of movability that they can do with something in the future. There's less flexibility. So anyone want to tackle that?
I'll try to tackle it, Council Member, Vice Mayor, excuse me, and what I'll it's up to the applicant at this point. Whether they want to have that that driveway be a separate lot or to be just an ingress egress easement at this point. And we can do that in the future once they submit an application to see what they're proposing. Because, like you said, there are benefits and to having it one way or another. To your second point, I mean, the FARs are pretty high for both those. For all 4 of those lots, they're anywhere between 75 to 89% FAR. But there are. It's not going to be like the homes are taking up the whole. It's not going to be like a townhome where the townhome is the outline of the house is going to be your property. There are, as you can see from the site plans, there is a front yard, there's a rear yard, and defined side yards and whatnot. So. We see as a staff as more detached because of the size of the homes themselves and whatnot, that these function more as detached single family homes. Not quite exactly how we have R1s are in Cupertino right now. They're a little more intense, but functionally a little bit more similar to a detached single family home.
Okay, so I was wondering if you could please bring up the site plan which showed the little dashed lines around the structures, which I'm referring to.
Sure.
And just to bring it back and take one more look at it.
Right here.
Yeah, so is there anything pointing to those lines as designating, because my assumption is that those were the potential future lot lines, but maybe that needs to be clarified.
Yeah, correct. We don't have a a boundary survey or tentative map right now, you know, as part of the application or submission. So what the best that the applicant has done these colored site plans and show potentially where these parcel outlines would be.
Okay, okay.
May I say something? This is Pratima from Architects. The dotted lines around the building is the roof overhang. It's not the parcel.
Okay, oh, thank you. Pratima, could you please clarify where you're expecting the property lines to be then for each of these lots?
So each parcel is color coded. Those will be the property lines. Each parcel has different color code. I'm not able to
Okay, so this
share
is
screen or point.
yeah. Okay, so this is the same as what we saw before, and are you trying to have the four lots then? Video is cut out.
And a driveway as an easement.
Driveway as an easement. Okay, very well. So this is what we saw previously. So there still is hanging out there that potential that this that SB 9 could affect this. All right, I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you very much. I understand what you're doing now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilwoman Moore.
Oh,
Vice Mayor Chow, did you want to?
yeah. Sorry, sorry, my computer messed up. So I was saying, I hope that there should be objective standards for the parcel and also for the future smaller parcels once they are subdivided, in case they are sold separately, designed by a different architect or developer, or it could be streamlined due to new state law. And also landscaping along Stevens Street around the border, and the privacy screening or design between adjoining subdivided parcels should be defined in the general plan amendment. And then also the voluntary community benefits offered. Once the GPA is approved, how would the community benefits offered become mandatory part of the code, the general plan? How would that be codified for this P zoning site? For example, the $30 per square foot for the BMR, and then the dedication of the sidewalk. How would that be codified? Thank you.
Let me tackle the easy one first. So the dedication of sidewalk is essentially in the ordinance already. So any development, regardless of whether it meets the code or not meets the code, it would be a public works requirement. So the dedication of sidewalk is not necessarily a community amenity. It's rather you're required to do it. Even if you just if this person was if they were just going to tear down this house and rebuild it and add square footage consistent with the ordinance, they would still most likely have to do that dedication. The second part of your question about the BMR, the amended BMR fee, that's $30 a square foot. That would be conditioned as part of the project and subsequent to any developer. So if this person was to say, you know, I don't have enough money to develop this, but I'm going to sell the development to somebody else, that condition would run with the land.
But once we approve the general plan amendment, the project might not be, a developer might come in with a new project and then say, oh, we can pay that that amended BMR fee anymore. There is nothing we can hold them on because we allowed you to subdivide so you can make more profit. And now the owner A sold the property to owner B, made the profit left. Owner B get the property at a higher price and then tell the city, sorry, I can't pay the higher BMR fee anymore.
Sure.
So how?
Sure, and you know, I can always, I can, you know, if the city attorney wants to jump in and clarify any type of ways we can memorialize these agreements, we could do the same way like we've done with the past general plan amendments, what we did with the hotels and
Yeah, it's very
No.
common for a developer to ask for a rezoning, increase the property value, sell it, the higher price just because of zoning change. And then the new developer would come and say, sorry, the cost is much higher, I can't do it anymore.
No, understood. And we would treat it the same way we did the last general plan amendments with the hotels, like the Danza Hotel and Cupertino Village, where those
Yeah.
are tied into the general plan amendment as well.
Yeah,
So
it's
there is,
basically like a free public gift.
yeah.
I think the community benefits are required as a part of a development agreement that is good for the project. Your question is, well, if the developer changed hands and someone didn't want to develop the proposed project, would they still be able to rely on the general plan amendments or the subdivision? And so that, I think we'd have to, I don't know the answer right off my head if we can tie those to the DA. I think it might not be the case. So I think the risk you're suggesting, might be a risk out there, but I'd have to
And
how
let's say,
approvals are usually structured more closely. I think, staff can work on trying to mitigate that risk with the approvals of the project.
let's say just in case we say one of the unit needs to be a BMR unit, and that would be part of the deed restriction, and that can be required, right?
Mhm. If it's done as a deed restriction, yeah.
But not not BMR fee.
Again, I think these are questions that, I'd have to research and think about further as we move the project forward. I think at this point, I would say what you're authorizing is to move forward with the general plan amendment application, but the actual approval of the project would come later. And these are questions that you could pose to our office, and we can work with the planning staff to see if there's a way to address your concerns as the project moves forward for consideration by the council. I hear your concern. It's just going to take a little more work to address completely.
Councilmember Willie?
If we could have that top view of the site again, and I'll try to keep it brief, just something that I'd at least like to point out. And maybe the applicant might have some comments to it.
Councilmember Willie, which top view specifically?
The one you just showed, the last one that was up.
Gotcha.
And so when I look at this, so there's no driveway for people to park cars. Next to each of the two ADUs, it appears there's 2 parking spaces outdoors, not in a garage. And so my thinking is that each of those ADUs is going to be using those 2 adjacent parking spaces. And then at the end of that drive are 2 spaces at the end. Again, the applicant might want to make a comment, but it would appear to me that with this being the case, all the homeowners have to park in their garage, and the ADUs will have to park in their uncovered spot, and there's 2 spots left over for 6, houses. And so, of course, there are HOAs with 0 lot lines and have similar type appearance, but usually they have more street frontage for, the residents to put their cars. If 2 of the sides of this parcel were curbed and available for parking, you could probably easily get 10 cars on the street. But with the only frontage that you have there, and visitors coming and going, I think there's a concern that street parking is going to conceivably overflow into the residential area. Um, like I say, maybe the applicant has a comment. Maybe it's better to just pick this up when they bring the project back. Um, but I would hope that they'll try to mitigate the impacts on the adjacent homeowners. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Willie. So it did sound like you wanted to ask potentially for follow-up from the applicant, but
Yeah, I can speak quickly, 2 minutes. Looking at the layout, we tried to provide as much parking on site as possible. The site is within half mile of public transit. ADU does not need a separate parking, but we still have provided one on site and one visitor parking per unit. So it fulfills the parking requirement.
okay.
Okay, thank you. Mhm.
Okay, I don't see any other hands raised at this point. We do have a motion on the table. Vice Mayor Chow, you've just raised your hand, and so let's take Vice Mayor Chow, if you can.
One question regarding ADU. So suppose the project right now doesn't have the ADU, let's remove the ADU. And then the new owner wants to build ADU later. Would they still be allowed to, under the current state law, to build that 660 square feet ADU that's currently planned?
Yes.
So they would still be allowed to, right? And
Yes.
then under the current state law, they don't have to provide parking, right?
Correct.
But then the current applicant, they did provide parking. That's over and beyond the state law requirement. And
Correct.
then even if they don't have ADU now, the project approved that someone build later, like they can still do that. And now they are providing a service to the homeowner to have a house that come with ADU. So I think it's okay. Yeah. Thank you.
If we authorize this process going forward today, what is the expected next intersection with our public process here? And when will this come back to council?
That's a great question. There's a lot of factors in play with that one. It's a matter of a lot of it's based on the turnaround from the applicant themselves. When can they come back with a full plan set, adequately responding to council's direction and staff's direction as well. There's a lot of things that we have to consider as staff too. There's also the environmental. We would probably most likely do, consult with a CEQA expert or consultant and see if what's the next step. Is an initial study, is this categorically exempt? We don't know at this time. We have to take that into consideration. We also have architectural consultants that we would use for design revisions if needed as well too. So this could be, we as mentioned, staff report, optimistically 6-7 months. It could go up to a year. It's really dependent upon turnaround times from us and the applicant as well.
Okay, well, my request, should we proceed with this process? I would just like to see an overall roadmap. I'd like to see touches with the public process, all the way from our committees, planning commission, us, and just the estimated timetable, work together with the applicant to see what's realistic for them so that we can have a sense of how this general plan authorization process is going to be looking like on the horizon, just in terms of our scheduling. So that's my last request. Are there other comments from council right now? So we do have the motion on the table. This is about the authorization process. Do we let it through the gate to submit a request for a general plan amendment? So seeing no other hands raised at this point, I will ask our city clerk to conduct a roll call vote. Madam City Clerk, would you please conduct that vote?
Councilmember Moore?
Aye.
Councilmember Way?
Aye.
Councilmember Willie?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Chow?
Aye.
Mayor Paul?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, Madam City Clerk. And we are on to public hearings. Item number 27 is a combination of our capital improvement program and the recommended budget for fiscal year 21 to 22. Considering the adoption of that budget and considering the establishment of an appropriation limit and related actions, or take other actions to approve interim expenditures. Madam City Manager, did you want to introduce this item?
I believe this is going to be handed over to, well, are we doing CIP first, correct?
But that's how it's laid out in the agenda, to consider CIP and the recommended budget. But
I'll hand this over to Director Alfaro.
Welcome, Director Alfaro.
Thank you, Mayor Paul, City Council members. We will cover the list of proposed CIP projects in one of the later slides this evening. Good evening, and I'll be presenting the fiscal year 21-22 final budget and the portion of the CIP. With me this evening is Finance Manager Zach Korach. We have just a few slides. Most of these slides you have seen before, so you're going to see us move pretty quickly through them. But department directors and other staff is available should you have questions at the end of the presentation. And I muted myself, so let me go ahead and share my screen here. Sorry about that. Here we go. So on the agenda this evening, we'll go very briefly through some themes that we're seeing in our the city's budget. We'll go over a timeline, changes since the proposed budget, and then we'll cover next steps. When we look at fiscal year 21-22 themes, what we really notice is the city has been able to weather the storm related to COVID and the economic uncertainty that the pandemic brought about, because we were already building on a strong fiscal foundation. And what we mean by that is the city had made several moves over the past 8 to 10 years, really, to put us in a good position. That included increasing our property tax rate, property tax share from 5.6% to 7%, increasing the transient occupancy tax rate, or TOT, from 10 to 12%, along with renegotiating a sales tax sharing agreement that previously had the city sharing sales tax proceeds 50-50, and then that was renegotiated to a 65-35. What we've also done is we've taken those revenue enhancements and even one-time revenues, and we've invested those into city infrastructure, and that can be seen in the amount of CIPs we've completed in previous years, along with our pavement condition index for the streets in Cupertino. And what we did with the rest of those dollars is we put them in 115 Trust to stabilize our pension, but we also built up a pretty healthy unassigned fund balance. And that really came into play when the pandemic hit, because we were able to buy ourselves a little time, wait a little bit before making any drastic decisions that we saw other cities around us making. It really allowed us to not have such a drastic course correction because we had that fund balance. This table or graphic before you, we actually showed this at the last proposed budget study session, but we've color-coded it to make it hopefully a little more clearer. And as we go through some subsequent slides, you'll see the similar color coding. And what this graphic is really meant to show is all the different pieces that go into the recommendations before you for the final budget and capital improvement plan. Anything you see in that maroon color is going to be related to the capital improvement plan, or CIP. Anything in the gray color is related to the proposed budget as it was printed on May 1st. Anything in the light blue is really related to work program, community funding, and proposed budget study session number 2. You take all those items together, and that is what builds the final budget that's before you for adoption. And just a little more on the changes that have occurred since May 1st when the proposed budget was printed. The proposed budget was recommended at $121 million across all funds. We've added a $26.2 million for the capital improvement plan, and this includes transfers out from the capital reserve to various other CIP projects to fund those projects, and $1.6 million in other charges, and those include work program cost, but also cost related that weren't able to make it into the original proposed budget at the time of printing. Overall, the budget before you this evening is 148.8 million. And this is really meant to show it at a summary level. I will hand it off now to Finance Manager Koratch, who will take you through a little bit more of the detail.
Thank you, Christina.
And I am trying to advance the slide. I just don't know why it's not working.
Let me see if I can request control. No. There we go. Okay, so the slide before you is following the same color scheme as the previous slide. We're looking at the changes since the publishing of the proposed budget. So starting in the far left and moving right, this is a summary level at the fund level. The proposed budget as of May 1st had included $121 million in recommended appropriations. The capital improvement program was introduced via study session on May 4th. And this evening it is recommended to add $26.2 million in new appropriations. It's important to note that of this $26.2 million, $11.4 million is related to transfers from the capital reserve. When capital projects are approved by City Council and funded, they will 9 times out of 10 require a transfer from the capital reserve or from an alternative funding source. City work program, and I want to emphasize that this is non-CIP. I know that there were some CIPs included on the city work program, but we're focusing really on the operating side. That was an additional $313,000. Operating changes, 1.27 million for a total recommended final budget of 148.8 million. The upcoming slides will look at a few of the details here. So we have the capital improvement program. We have all the descriptions of the capital improvement program projects on the right, but I'll be focusing on the totals here at the bottom. The total all funds, new appropriations of 26.2 million, again, offset with revenues, predominantly transfers in of 11.4 million. The remainder is grant funding for 2 of the CIPs, electric vehicle parking expansion, as well as the full-size outdoor basketball court, for a net use or total use of fund balance of 14.4 million. City work program, again, a description of the work program items are on the right. And we have the total across all city funds, the additional $313,000. The operating changes, many of these City Council has seen in previous study sessions, most notably legal costs for Community Development Department, various full-time employee requests or position requests. But I want to focus on the first 2, these 2 items, one for community funding and the City Manager Discretionary Fund. These items have been adjusted since the last study session on June 4th. There was a minor adjustment increasing community funding by, I believe it was $3,000. And then most notably, as per direction from City Council, a reduction to the City Manager Discretionary Fund of $518,250 for a final recommended discretionary fund balance of $75,000. And so to continue on the subject of contingency budgeting, I know City Council had some questions and concerns regarding contingency budgeting at the last session, so we wanted to provide some additional clarification and reiterate some points that have been made previously. 2 contingency budgets within the budget document itself. One is a departmental contingency. Every program has a contingency budget within the respective departments. It's calculated at 2.5% of the materials and contracts, and citywide, this amounts to $595,000. There's also a City Manager Discretionary Fund that resides in the Administration Department, and this was a total of $593,000. It was calculated through 2 components. The first being 2.5% of general fund based materials and contracts. This calculation does exclude the sheriff contract as well as the city attorney's contract and results in $305,000. The second component is $288,000 that is earmarked for Public Works unforeseen maintenance and repairs. As we discussed it at the previous session, oftentimes during the course of the fiscal year, there are unforeseen events that take place. If it's a failure of a boiler, AC unit, fallen tree, things will happen that really cannot be planned or anticipated. And those are good examples of when the city manager discretionary fund can be used. Lastly, in the last bullet here in the middle point, again, a reminder that the final budget, as per the recommended action in the staff report, the resolution does include $75,000 for that city manager discretionary fund. And then lastly, to touch on budget practices and sort of general budget practices, not only within the county and also within the city of Cupertino. The city does implement a zero-based budgeting practice. This is where every single dollar in the budget is accounted for. And we also refer to this as no fluff budgeting, right? So what is budgeted in materials and contract services, we have thousands of line items that describe exactly what makes up those dollars. Other jurisdictions may not deploy a zero-based budgeting system. They could use an alternative method such as activity-based budgeting, which budgets at a little bit of a higher level based on the nature or the scope of the activity or the program. City Council had directed staff to look at 3 other jurisdictions, one being City of Campbell, the other City of Sunnyvale, and then lastly, City of Mountain View. There did not appear to be any explicit mention of contingencies or city manager discretionary fund. One observation that was made was the City of Sunnyvale appeared to have $2.5 million budgeted for miscellaneous expenditures. However, miscellaneous expenditures did not appear to be defined. It ended up equating to approximately 1% of the general fund budget. And that's something that could be similar to a contingency. And I think the point is that every agency is a little bit different and may be more or less reliant on something like contingency budgeting, depending on how they budget in the first place, if it's activity-based or zero-based. As far as the next steps, pursuant to budget adoption this evening, the next time we'll be in front of City Council to report out on the 21-22 budget will be first quarter in November. Later this year, we'll also be reporting out on the fiscal year 2021 year-end performance. And with that, that will conclude the presentation. Typically, we will read off the recommended actions, but as noted in the staff report, those are quite lengthy. So I'll elect not to do that. I'll turn it back over to the council for questions.
Thank you, Zach. Thank you, Director Alfaro and Madam City Manager. Are there any questions from City Council at this time? See, Councilmember Way, you have your hand raised.
Sorry. Yes, I have one question that I did not ask when I was doing agenda review. Thursday agenda review really is pretty rushed, so I didn't read every page, but I tried to read every page. So this one I did not catch. So my question is, in the community development budget, there is approximately $500,000 of legal fees. Is that part of our attorney's legal budget, or is it separate from it? Legal cost. It said on page 9, and on G it says approved $500,000 of appropriations for community development department legal costs as included in attachment E. So is that part of our whole legal cost, or is it separate just for this? And what's that legal cost is for?
Yeah, Councilmember Ware, Mr. Mayor, if I may respond to the question, Ben Fu, Director of Community Development. Good question, Councilmember Ware. So as you may be aware, we do have a number of development projects. And so many of these projects, as well as some of our large work program items, do require special counsel evaluation. So we set aside a dollar amount to make sure we can cover for additional legal services. And that's what that $500,000 is for.
I'm sorry, so is it part of our attorney's fee budget, or is separate in addition to it?
I may need some help from Zach, but my understanding is separate from it.
So it's in addition to what's in the city attorney budget.
I see. Okay. And okay, is that, because this is my first year as council, is it usual? Is it every year you have this budget, or is just particularly this year?
Well, it can be usual, depending on the jurisdiction the projects are facing. For us, we've come to a realization that recently we've had, like I said, a number of large development projects that require some special care and review by legal. So we want to make sure we're able to cover those fees as they progress, so we don't hold up any project reviews.
Okay, so maybe I should be really straightforward. We have one big development project, so we are talking about Valco, right?
No, we have a number. I mean, we have a really large development project. But we have a number of other ones.
Oh
as
yeah,
well.
we have. Yes, okay, we have. What's it? Westport too.
That's correct.
Okay, so this is a budget for everything that you might incur on the development.
That's correct.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Moore.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Way. I was looking at the $500,000 as well, and it doesn't look like there was a line item for legal fees in the community development budget previously, and so this looks like something new, and I don't understand why we didn't see it previously. It seems as though that should have been there, and it looks like it would be a contracted services amount, but I'm not sure. So I'm really curious about where this actually appeared from. Now, going back to the report, the city of Sunnyvale, under their Office of the Manager, their budget summary, they do have a miscellaneous item, and it's 203,188 miscellaneous expenditures. It's under the non-personnel category. And then when I looked, I didn't see contingencies in the surrounding cities, and my concern is that this was something that showed up under Manager Brandt, and the way it looked from a resident standpoint at it is that it looked as though he gave himself the contingency budget, the discretionary fund, and in it, I know there was a description that we were given for what it would be used for, but actually in our own budget, it says that the program contingency budgets may be used to cover unanticipated program expenses at the department's discretion, while the use of the city manager contingency will require city manager approval. And I appreciate that the council agreed with reducing this amount. So this one, while the other contingencies are stated to be based on materials plus contract services times 2.5%, this contingency amount isn't based on that. It's just a dollar amount, which I haven't quite been able to get on board with at all. So I'll leave it at that. I think it's very useful to look at the neighboring cities' budgeting requests, how they handle their reporting for their city councils, and it's very educational for us. All right, I'll leave it at that for now. I'll probably have some more questions in a minute.
Mr. Mayor, if I may just make one remark. I think through looking at other cities, you can see that we're all slightly different for different reasons, some being how we were created at the beginning. I have spoken with several of their city managers. They all seem to have a contingency. It's a matter of where they put it. And, we didn't have the chance to talk to each and every one of them or what they call it. So it's hard to tell just on the surface if you're looking at budget documents from another city as to where a contingency might be book kept. So it's just that we're all a little different.
I do have another question, Mayor Paul, if I may.
Sure.
I would like an explanation for cost allocation. And I've read the definition. It shows up in 2 places in the budget, and it tends to read like a transfer between departments. I'd like to understand that. Thank you.
I think that's probably a question for somebody in finance, either Director Alfaro or Zach. Did you want to tackle the question? Explaining cost
Yeah, happy
allocation?
to. Councilmember Moore, so cost allocation is a mechanism for determining and reporting out really the full cost of an activity. When we look at cost allocation year over year, we have various service providers internally. If we, like finance or HR would be a good example, innovation and technology would be a good example of services that they provide to other departments. And based on the utilization and based on budgetary and actual uses from a dollar standpoint, those charges from the service providers to the recipients are completed. And so looking at it year over year, they could be subject to significant fluctuations. A lot of that has to do with staffing allocations. If there are increases or decreases in staffing, that could lead to a significant proportional change from one year to the next. But high level cost allocation is determining, calculating, reporting out the true cost of services that are provided to other departments.
Okay, so I would think that you would have some departments would have like positive numbers and other departments would have negative numbers, right? And what it looks like is that every department is charging this number and it's increasing the total budgeted amount. And then as a consumer of the budget and looking at these numbers, how can I possibly know if these are accurate?
So knowing whether they're accurate or not, I guess looking at a budget document, you may not be able to. They are subject to annual audits. When we have our annual comprehensive financial report conducted by our external auditors, the cost allocation plan specifically is subject to that audit. It is reviewed. So they do ascertain to reasonable assurance that it is accurately and fairly stated. Beyond that, being able to look at the budget document, it is difficult, I would say, because although we have cost allocation charges that are shown on the expenditure line item, the revenue side, it does roll up into charges for services. We can look at that in future years, perhaps under budget format, if there would be a different way, or perhaps even expanding in the budget document, perhaps having a section that explains in more detail the cost allocation plan and its mechanics.
Okay, and lastly, I saw the number 148.8 million, and then I'm seeing another number of 121 million, and I'd like to understand what's the correlation, because it almost seems like it should be saying that our resolution should be stating 148.8 million rather than the 121. So I wanted to verify that.
That's correct. That the 148.8 is the total should council approve the alphabet soup that's right after the 121. The way we generally set up the final budget hearing and adoption is because there's been a lot of direction given to staff between all of these meetings that we have. We want to make sure we call out each of those adjustments. So should council want to vote on, say, the 121, but maybe want to have more discussion on the other letters in between, or for the CIP, if they want to adopt a certain number of CIPs but want to have discussion in others, it's really made to help facilitate that discussion. And so we can kind of piece the pieces together of what council wants to approve as the adopted budget.
And if I could just add on just quickly, this year when we look at attachment A and B specifically, A is focusing on the operating. It excludes the capital improvement program. If we were to combine resolution A and resolution B, we would arrive at the 148.8 million.
Okay, I don't see further questions from Councilmember Moore, and so Councilmember Way, your hand is back up. Did you have a follow-up question?
Yes, I have a quick question, actually for clarification for the public, maybe reaffirm my knowledge too. On number 3, the resolution number 21054, establishing an appropriation limit, that has a, can you explain it? Okay, I know what it is, but I can't quite say it. It has something to do with, we have to set up a appropriation limit so that we can get all the funding we could get. But could you explain that a little bit one more time, maybe for the public and for my own sake too?
Sure. This is a piece of legislation that was passed years ago that effectively put a cap or a limit, an appropriations limit in place that restricted or capped the amount of general revenues that the cities or jurisdictions would be able to receive on an annual basis. The proposed resolution sets a limit or recommends a limit of $114.7 million. Usually on an annual basis and historically for the city of Cupertino, we've only ever come to about 60% of that figure. We're really going to be focusing on the tax revenues for the city that would be subject to that limit. And if they're in the event of an excess, which again, the city is currently at this time not in risk of exceeding that appropriations limit, any excesses would have to be returned to the state.
Right, so we set up a limit that's really comfortable, so to make sure that we receive all the money that we could receive.
Correct.
Is that the logic?
Just as a clarification, and Zach, please jump in here and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's really related so an agency can't overtax its taxpayer base. And so when Zach talks about the appropriation limit, I know it's confusing because generally if we're talking about appropriations, that's an expense word that we use, but really when it comes to this, it's that how much tax dollars we're collecting.
And then who decide on the number, on the amount?
So the amount of the appropriations limit, there are calculation factors or adjustment factors that are outlined in Proposition 111 using per capita and county population that go into that appropriation calculation. On an annual basis, the city will calculate it taking the highest increase allowable per legislation.
Okay, thank you, Zach. So there is a formula that calculates the number.
Absolutely.
That's correct. And our external auditors also audit our calculation of that as well.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, thank you, Councilmember Way. I don't have other hands raised at this point. Councilmember Moore, your hand is back up. Councilmember Moore.
Okay, thank you. One last item. I was reading that our budget must be balanced by law, and I was wondering if you can point me to the piece of paper summary which shows us that our budget is balanced.
Give us a second while we pull that up.
And Christina, I know while you're looking for that, it will generally be the financial overview by fund is one of, I think, the sections in the table of contents. When we look at a balanced budget, we're looking at the revenues less the expenditures. However, within that definition, the use of fund balance, I believe, is an allowable component for determining whether a budget is balanced or not. Right, so a lot of times, in recent history for the city of Cupertino, revenues have exceeded expenditures in the general fund, but across all funds, typically there will be a bit of a deficit or a utilization of fund balance. So it's not to say that the budget isn't balanced, it's just to say that the city is able to use fund balance in order to balance its budget.
Okay, kind of a last question. So what is our flexibility to make alterations? Let's say, do we have buyer's remorse? Say tomorrow we just don't see that the 500,000 in the community development legal fee budget, that we disagree with that. Can we change things? And what's the process? or we want to appropriate more to contract services is somewhere else. How do we get things to move around? Or I've got an email from a member of the public that doesn't agree with some of the spending that we have. What can we do to, if we think, well, this isn't the right year to do it, let's do it some other year. How can we make that change happen?
Those adjustments are generally going to be brought up as part of our quarterly reporting or as separate agenda items to council. And council could also agendize those items if they wanted us to look at something to review that budget. But any changes to the budget going over at the fund level are required to be approved by the city council. Administratively, the city manager with the department heads does have the authority within each fund to move the dollars around at the object level, to say from materials to contracts or contracts to materials. And that's really based on when we start our budget process and start making our estimates of where we think dollars are going to land for the year. We start that process in November for the subsequent fiscal year. And then we continue to make adjustments as we go through. And budget staff will review those requests for transfers to make sure they're appropriate before they get made. And there are times when we will say, hey, that you're going to need more money than you have budgeted. You're going to have to go to council for an adjustment. And those get, again, brought as part of our quarterly reports if the timing is right on it. Otherwise, they're brought as separate staff reports.
Okay. And going back to my previous question about the balanced budget, in my mind, it seems as though we should be able to take attachment B and attachment A and add in the revenues and the expenditures, and those columns should equal. Does that happen?
Yes, you just have to add one more, and that's the use of fund balance at the bottom. So that's that we're using our savings account to balance it out.
Okay, so it would be my preference that would be that we'd have like the summary all together, because that's the end question that I feel that we have to answer as council members is our budget balanced? And rather than having to jump between the two pages, the two documents and get it all together, that would be helpful.
Yeah, and when we put the final budget document together, it's currently page 103 in the proposed, but it's the financial overview by fund that shows the revenue, the expenses by fund, and the use of fund balance that will show you that balancing item.
Yeah, I'm on that page, but I know that the numbers have changed since then. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Moore. Let's bring it to our members of the public at this time. I don't see any hands raised from the public. And so if there are any hands that would like to be raised, I'll wait another 10 seconds or so. Hey, we do have one hand raised now. It's from Jennifer Griffin. And to our other members of the public, if you'd like to speak, please raise your hand before Jennifer concludes speaking. Welcome, Jennifer. Okay, Jennifer, I'll unmute your phone line as well. You'll need to hit *6 on your phone.
Oh, hi. Can you guys hear me?
We can hear you.
Yeah,
Yes.
I've reinstalled. Yeah, believe me, I'll be so glad to retire Zoom. I have reinstalled the app. I don't know what's going on. We're going to try a Zoom session tomorrow. Anyway, thank you guys for taking such careful pains with our budget. As a member of the public, I'm very glad to be able to see the items on the screen that you've gone through. I mean, this meeting's gone on 4 hours now, and it's really nice to be able to follow clearly the presentations. I'm really happy with the budget and how things are running. I'm a little bit cross about the Zoom situation, but thanks for all your hard work, and good luck with everything. I've had one heck of a night. We also had a family friend die tonight, so my phone was tied up for 4 hours, so I didn't get the phone call. Anyway, thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Very sorry to hear that. Okay, so we'll bring it back to the council. There are no other hands raised from the public. We can bring it back for a motion. Would anyone like to move the recommendation as a point of discussion? Councilmember Moore, your hand is raised.
Yes, Mayor Paul, I believe we're prepared to move 1, 2, and 3. Do I have that correct? Because then I'll read the whole motion. If we are there, then I'll go ahead. So the recommendation.
I mean, I don't think you necessarily need to read it in its entirety.
Oh, no. I have got a short way to get through it. I just want to make sure that we're ready to go with 1, 2, and 3. That's right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, great. Okay, so I move that we adopt resolution number 21-052, establishing an operating budget of $122,615,187 for fiscal year 2021 to 2022, which includes the changes A through K of the agenda to the fiscal year 2021 to 2022 proposed budget, published on May 1st, 2021. And 2, that we adopt resolution number 21-053, establishing a capital improvement program budget of $26,230,048 for fiscal year 2021 to 22, which included line items A through T of the agenda. And lastly, that we item 3, adopt resolution number 21-054, establishing an appropriation limit of $114,666,491 for fiscal year 2021 to 22. Do I have a second?
Does Vice Mayor like to
I'll second.
Okay, so we have the recommendation, and that's moved by Councilmember Moore, seconded by Vice Mayor Chow. Would anyone like to begin on deliberation? Vice Mayor Chow, your hand is raised.
Yeah. So I think we have had study sessions. So, but like I mentioned last time, I feel like with CIP budget, we are seeing only 1 year budget, and we are spending millions, tens and millions of dollars without knowing what other things down the pipeline we need to spend money on. The maintenance of the many city buildings. Back in 2019, when Tim Bolden was the city manager, I asked for a complete list of all the city projects, including those we've studied but didn't really approve a project. For example, the golf course, the Stevens Creek corridor plan, the Stockmeyer house. There were a lot of things that was studied, or at least it's considered, and seismic improvement. There was a whole list of hundreds of millions of dollars. I don't see that list here. It's too late now, and now that we have likely Greg on board, I hope. Let's look at, is there a way for the city to really don't plan just 1 year at a time, especially we are spending so much money a year. We need to know everything we might need to spend our money on before we approve a budget like this. That said, today we were at the flag raising, and then that reminded me we had this great rainbow stripe installed in the crosswalk in front of Main Street. And I think at that time, Mayor Paul and I were assigned to a subcommittee to look at other locations that we can install such a stripe. But we never conducted a meeting. So I guess at that time, that rainbow stripe was also a result because the city was installing a new sidewalk anyway. So as part of that project, we are installing a stripe. So I would like to know whether the city would be doing any other sidewalk project in the next year, and maybe we can consider that additional option for next year. Yeah, so just making that comment. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Vice Mayor Chow. As a person who suggested the motion to form that subcommittee, I actually, saw it as more of an investigation into what measures we could be taking to support the LGBTQ community. And to that end, I did want to make sure that we issued the first proclamation since 2008, recognizing June as LGBTQ month. But you're certainly correct. We did form the subcommittee, and it wasn't. I say this as the motion maker. It wasn't for the express purpose of finding other areas to put rainbow crosswalks in.
Oh.
It was for the purpose of trying to find ways we can be supporting the LGBTQ committee. And it wasn't a subcommittee, it was a task force that I was asking to create. So that's true. There hasn't been follow-up. I think that's both on the council side as well as on staff side to try to see what we can be doing to reach out to the community to see what what the appetite is. And so hopefully our actions this month thus far are a good move in that direction. And so I do note that this is our second meeting of the month. The month is about halfway through, and there is a good amount of time left in it. And we are going on what is effectively our summer break pretty soon. So, I think that maybe there's some bandwidth to investigate and move forward on that.
Maybe I misunderstood but then I have been thinking that, for example, right in front of the Andal College, since we are reviewing the Westport project, right? That might be another ideal location for another stripe.
Okay. Yeah, I know. I was just clarifying, what,
Okay.
what as the motion maker I was intending to create there. So, Councilmember Moore, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you. I think that's a great point that you bring up, Vice Mayor Chow, about wanting to know the entire costs. When I look at the city of Sunnyvale's adopted budget, they have it set up in two parts, Volume 1 and Volume 2, and their 2020-2021 adopted budget Volume 2 has their capital improvement projects in it. And when you get around PDF 90, you'll see that they're showing the current 2019 to 20, all the way up to 2029 to 2030 for various projects like the Calabasas Creek Trail low water crossings. They've got a dollar amount for each year moving forward, and then a project life total amount at the end. And they have this for all sorts of their capital improvement projects, which have multiple years involved. And then if it doesn't have a multiple year, they just have dashes for it. So this could be something that finance works with Public Works in order to develop this in the future, which will address your question. And likewise, when you mentioned Greg, perhaps he has some insight for that, so that we can have that information. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you, Councilmember Moore. Well, I don't see further hands raised at this point. So what I'll do is I'll call out Vice Mayor Chow, who has raised at this time.
Sorry, yeah. So I looked up the 2020 CIP study session at that time. We did have a 5-year CIP plan that projected for 5 years how much spending, because a lot of them are multi-year projects. So we had that, and we also had a list of other projects that totals to $298 million total. Of course, we don't have to do all of them, but these are all things that have been studied, estimated by the city, or some of them we have done feasibility study. $298 million. It seems this at least should be put on the table when we do the CIP study next year. I hope that we have a broader scope before we narrow on what do we work on this year, and likely, hopefully, have a 5-year plan. Yeah, thank you.
I mean, that's a good observation. Different perspectives might have different ways of looking at it.
So that's on the 2019 April 23rd agenda, if anyone wants to look it up.
Yeah, I do remember that document. It was very significant on. Okay, Councilman, your hand up.
He's super quick. Also in the Sunnyvale's CIP budget, they're showing funded and unfunded projects, which would address, again, what the vice mayor's requesting for information, because it looks like they just take an unfunded project and they put it in the queue and move on with it, and that might help for us to plan more efficiently in the future.
Sure. Okay, well, great. Like a good ongoing project to help to universalize processes, so we can all be comparing apples to apples and helping hopefully to make our jurisdictions better. All right, Vice Mayor Chow, we'll give you last word.
All right.
Your hand
Very quickly. Since I mentioned that this is actually on the April 30th council agenda. This is the document that I talked about. So the total is $298 million and different kind of projects that could be in our bike plan, park plan, capital improvement plan. Yeah.
Hey, thank you, Councilmember. Vice Mayor Chow. So just to specify, you're talking about April of 2021 or 2019?
2019.
Okay, great, very good. Okay, so we are on to calling the question for this item. Madam City Clerk, would you please give us a roll call vote?
Councilmember Moore?
Aye.
Councilmember Way?
Aye.
Councilmember Willie?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Chow?
Aye.
Mayor Paul?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you very much. We are on to item number 28. This is consider approving the fiscal year 21 to 22 Community Development Block Grant or CDBG Program Annual Action Plan. Madam City Clerk, would you like to introduce the person providing the presentation for us tonight? I'm sorry, Madam City Manager. That was.
That's okay. Mr. Mayor, I'd like to introduce Ms. Carrie Husa, our housing manager, and Mr. Gabriel Borden, our housing planner. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. I know Gabe will have a presentation. Welcome.
Good evening. Mayor, if I may, before we start, I just want to very quickly introduce Gabriel. Gabriel's one of our new additions to the housing division. I think Gabriel started in February, just a few months ago. Already taken on a number of projects, including the CDBG project here. So just want to take this opportunity and recognize Gabe and welcome him to the city of Cupertino family. Thank you.
Okay. Welcome, Gabe Borden.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Let me bring up my presentation. Okay, hopefully you all can see that now. All right, so I'll keep it relatively short because I know we're late here and we have a packed agenda. So today, as was mentioned, I am talking about the fiscal year 2021-2022 CDBG Annual Action Plan. As you may be aware, this is the CDBG program, the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development. They annually allocate entitlement grants to local jurisdictions for community development activities. And jurisdictions must typically have a population of 50,000 or more to qualify, such as Cupertino. And this is the city's 19th year as an entitlement jurisdiction, receiving a CDBG grant directly from HUD. So I'll be going over some of the plans that we submit to HUD. The first one is the consolidated plan. As you may be aware, this is a 5-year planning document that identifies local community development needs and sets forth a strategy to address those needs utilizing federal CDBG funds. So the 2020 to 2025 consolidated plan was approved by the City Council on June 14th, 2020. So I like to think of this as the larger 5-year planning document. And I kind of think of it as the umbrella of which the annual action plan fits under. and this is what we are discussing today. This is the one-year planning document that covers the upcoming fiscal year. So this year will be 2021, 2022, and that describes the eligible activities that the city intends to undertake to address the needs identified in the consolidated plan. And so this is due to HUD by August 16th annually. And so this is a forward-looking document. And just to clarify, you maybe also remember we have the CAPER, which is the Consolidated Annual Performance and Evaluation Report. This is a one-year planning document that reports accomplishments of the prior fiscal year, so 2020 to 2021, that were outlined in the Consolidated Plan and Annual Action Plan. And this is due to HUD by September 30th. So this is the backwards-looking document. But as I mentioned, tonight we are discussing or going over the Annual Action Plan. And so here's the timeline that we're working with. In November of last year, we had the annual request for proposals that was issued. And then February of this year, the RFP deadline ended. April, Council adopted the funding allocations for CDBG, BMR, general funds. Then April through May, we had our 30-day public comment period. May 13th, the Housing Commission recommended the Annual Action Plan. Tonight, we bring it to you. And then August 16th, we will submit to HUD. And just to give a little bit of a further breakdown, this is the budget that you'll see. That lists the entitlement amount, the total amount, which is the 412, program income, the allocations for program administration, public service, and capital housing projects, which includes $48,000 of unused fiscal year 2020-2021 CDBG funds. And further broken down within that, we have public services, which includes Live Oak's Senior Adult Daycare Program and West Valley's Care Program. And then for our capital housing projects, it breaks down to Rebuilding Together, their program, and also West Valley's Vista Village renovation project. And so with that, the next steps are to adopt draft resolution approving the CDBG fiscal year 2021 to 2022 annual action plan. And then this plan will be submitted, as mentioned, to HUD for final approval by August 16th. And so with that, I will yield back, defer back to the mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabriel. Are there any questions from council on the presentation? Councilmember Moore.
Okay. Thank you, Gabriel. I was just curious about I believe it's the Live Oak respite program. It was like senior care. Could you explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so this is Live Oak's Senior Adult Daycare Program, where they provide services to older clientele and also to disabled clientele. And this is a contract that was, this is I believe a 3-year contract. So I think we are in the second year or third year of that contract.
Okay. And when they say respite, is this for the people who are ordinarily providing care, family members, or I don't understand that, just the use of that word there.
Carrie, do you have more clarification on that?
Of course. Thank you, Councilmember Morse. So the Live Oak Center operates as a day center to provide respite for the caretakers, as you said. And so oftentimes these folks live with their family, and it allows for activities and entertainment, and it also gives the family members an opportunity to catch up on life.
That's what I thought, and
yeah,
and there's caregiver burnout, and it's a lot of work. Yeah, I was a little bummed out, to be honest. Seeing it looked like you did outreach and you didn't get comments back in the citizen participation outreach. I guess people were really busy last year, so you had public hearings, newspaper ads, website, email blast, public hearing, and it didn't look like any comments came in at all. And I don't know how to take that. I'm going to assume it means that everything's been going great and people are happy. Do you have any ideas about that?
Carrie, you can comment further if you want, since I wasn't here last fiscal year. But generally, I used to be with the city of San Jose, and it was also the case that we didn't receive much public comment there either. It is a large document and can be a little bit tenuous to read the whole entire thing and provide comment. But my hope is that it's a good sign of our work here at the city.
Yes, and it seems as though there's a lot of, I want to say, kind of red tape that you need to go through, and that this has a lot of oversight for how the money is spent, and it looks like that's just my impression. Is that about right? That the spending of this money is regulated pretty heavily.
I would definitely say so.
Yeah, it looked like that. And I have been to the Housing Commission in years past, pre-COVID, when you were looking over the CDBG money, and I really commend the Housing Commission. They were so careful about making sure and having a good, real rigorous discussion about where the money would be allocated, and I'm really impressed with that work. Okay, so thank you. That's all I have for questions.
Thank you, Councilmember Moore. I don't see any other hands raised right now from council. And so what I'll do is I'll move it over to the members of the public. There are no hands currently raised from the members of the public. And so for the public, if you want to speak on this item number 28, please raise your hand at this time. Okay, we'll bring it back to council. Is there a motion with regard to item number 28? The recommended action is to move to adopt resolution number 21-055 approving the fiscal year 21 to 22 CDBG annual action plan. Would anyone like to move that? Councilmember Moore, you have your hand raised.
So moved.
Councilmember Way, would you like to second?
Second.
Great. Okay, so we have the motion and the second. Is there any desire for further discussion on the item? I don't see hands raised, and so Madam City Clerk, if you would please conduct the roll call vote.
Councilmember Moore,
Aye.
Councilmember Way,
Aye.
Councilmember Willie,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Chow,
Aye.
Mayor Paul.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. We are on to item number 29. That is considering substantial amendments to the fiscal year 19 to 20 annual action plan and the fiscal years 15 to 20 consolidated plan to provide funding to assist unhoused members of the encampments located along Wolf Road near I-280, to mitigate safety standards, including COVID-19, and to provide funding for the senior meal delivery program, which are eligible for Department of Housing and Urban Development activities in response to COVID-19. And so, Madam City Manager, would you like to provide the summary of what essentially this opportunity for obtaining funding entails?
Sure, and then I can hand it over to Ben and Carrie. Yeah, this item is to take in some HUD dollars. So again, Councilmember Moore's comments are very much appreciated when taking in other people's dollars. There's always what I call hooks in them or strings attached. So it's a very regulated, set of dollars, but we're very fortunate to have the opportunity to receive them. So with this HUD funding, we're able to replenish the dollars that council approved last year with regards to addressing the housing for the encampment members along Wolf Road to the tune of $200,000, along with being able to replenish the fund for the senior meal plan that we kicked off also during COVID to help at one time at the peak about 32 seniors who needed help with meals during this time. So either way the council looks at it, you're either taking money to pay the city back for the expenditures under COVID, or you are giving yourselves flexibility to address things in the future. But it's an opportunity to take in the HUD dollars.
Thank you, Madam City Manager. Did you have anything to add, Director Fu or Carrie?
Well, I just want to say, Mayor, we had the same housing team back. Carrie Hughes is the housing manager, and we have Gabriel Gordon, the senior housing planner. We did have a brief presentation prepared But I think Deb's city manager's overview is pretty perfect. So we'll just be available for questions unless you still like to see that presentation. Just consider your time.
Well, it's good to have it in your pocket in case it's useful for the questions from council. And so I see Vice Mayor Chow with a hand raised. Vice Mayor Chow, or questions at this point.
Yeah, so these hot dollars would replenish expenses we already spent, right? And then the money saved for the city, would this, so we will essentially get that extra money. Do we need to put that in a special pot so they can only be used for similar purposes, or the dollar will just go to general fund?
Sure. Thank you, Vice Mayor Chow. Carrie Huesler, good evening. So following up on Gabe's presentation where he outlined the documents related to the forward planning for CDBG, as Deb mentioned, this is basically receiving HUD dollars, and now we have to amend some documents to tell them how we're going to move forward. And so the breakdown of this, it's really actually an application for funds. And so we had to tell them how we plan to spend. And we have approximately $25,000 to the senior meal delivery program, and then $234,000 approximately to the Wolf Road encampment program. And those are eligible expenses for these HUD CARES dollars.
And so,
what I mean is we will get about $250,000 back. And then this 250,000, do they just go to the general fund, or do they go to a special fund we would use for community services later?
Sure. So CDBG dollars, we're basically a pass-through to allocate CDBG dollars to low and moderate income uses in the Cupertino jurisdiction. And for these dollars, they've been earmarked to serve any eligible items that have had a COVID impact. And so we're able to use them to replenish the senior meal delivery program, the Wolf Road encampment program, and then we also have an additional $34,000 to program towards the Wolf Road encampment program. So we are.
Let me try it. I think I know what the Vice Mayor is asking, and Christina, correct me if I'm wrong. So one way you could look at it, Vice Mayor, if I understand your question correctly, is the previous dollars that the council appropriated to address that homeless encampment, that came out of the general fund. So these specific dollars are, since they're colored a certain way, have to stay for those purposes. But you could decide to take the other dollars and maybe push them back to the general fund. So it's basically paying us back and taking that space. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to ask. Yeah. Let me use a simpler dollar amount. I think, for example, we spent $200 for the services during COVID, and then now we find out there is hot dollars. So we are saying, okay, this $100 we would apply for hot grant to cover our $100 expenses. That has limitations, but that fits the category we already spent on. And now we earlier allocated $200 for that. And now the city only needs to spend 100 because the other 100 is covered by HUD. So my question is then the $100 city will get back. Does that go back to the general fund or the council? It seems like you are saying the council can make a decision to say, okay, this $100 is actually $250,000, but $100 we would decide we keep it at the community service grant, a separate pot that maybe we need to create and say that would be for future community service projects. Or we can just put it all entirely back to the general fund.
So maybe I can further clarify that a little bit, Vice Mayor. I apologize for the interruption. So the bulk of the amount will be in a separate BMR housing special revenue fund. The remainder that we don't get reimbursed for the money we've already spent, let's say roughly $25,000, that goes back into the general fund, for your allocation, if that makes any sense.
Okay. Well, that's clear. Thank you. Councilmember Way?
So I was reading the report and I had the same question, but it is in the staff report. It says during fiscal year 2020-2021, the city incurred $25,265.57 in senior meal delivery costs in general fund and $200,000 for homeless encampment costs. So this money that comes back will result in an anticipated increase to fund balance in the general fund of $25,265.57 because that came from the general fund, and $200,000 in the BMR Affordable Housing Special Revenue Fund. So whatever comes back, we spend on general fund, which is $25,000, a little bit over $25,000, will go back to the general fund. But the $200,000 that we spent on a homeless camp, that money, when we get back, will go back to the BMR Affordable Housing Special Revenues Fund.
Great. Thank you very much for that further clarification on that, Councilman Way. So, yeah, let me go to the members of the public now. And I don't see hands raised on item number 29. We'll go ahead and wait a moment if we do. So this item 29 to members of the public, if you'd like to speak on it. I don't see hands raised, and so we'll go back to council. Would anyone like to move the recommended action, which following our public hearing is the adoption of resolution number 21-056, approving the material as delineated in our agenda under item number 29. Councilmember Way, would you like to move this?
Yes, so moved.
Okay, would anyone like to second? Councilmember Moore.
Second?
Very good. Yeah, I don't see desire for further discussion. Ultimately, it allows us to obtain federal funding to replenish and restore our BMR housing fund, as well as our general fund to a certain extent as well. So, Madam City Clerk, if you would please conduct a roll call vote on item number 29.
Councilmember Moore?
Aye.
Councilmember Way?
Aye.
Councilmember Willie?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Chow?
Aye.
Mayor Paul?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you very much. We're on to item number 30, and item number 30 is a consideration of fiscal year 20 to 21 and the fiscal year 21 to 22 fee schedule amendments to Schedule A. This regards our municipal code chapter 2.100, which refers to an annual lobbyist registration fee regarding the regulation of lobbying activities in the city of Cupertino. Is there a staff report for this item? Madam
Mayor, just quickly, I know that we're running a little behind tonight. So staff is requesting an amendment to the adopted fiscal year 2020-2021 and fiscal year 21-22 fee schedules. An amendment is necessary to add the new proposed annual lobbyist registration fee. So council adopted ordinance number 21-222, adding the regulation of lobbying activities to the Cupertino Municipal Code with an operative date of July 1, 2021. So the fee coincides with this ordinance. The fee charges are to recover the city's reasonable regulatory costs for lobbyist registration. And so your action for consideration is to adopt resolution number 21-057, amending the fee schedules, reflecting staff's recommendation.
Okay, thank you, Madam City Clerk. So we'll consider that the reading of the proposed motion when we come back. Are there any questions of the City Clerk with regard to item number 30? Seeing none, I'll move to our member of the public with a hand raised. Jennifer, you are on your phone 0741 and you may talk *6. Welcome. So Jennifer, *6 is what you'll have to press to unmute yourself.
Okay, I did. Okay, sorry. What a night. You know, I think this is a really good plan to have this. I was in San Jose in one of their city councils long ago, and I noticed that they had lobbyists would have to register before they spoke. And I think that with the issues going on, especially when we have Zoom calls, when we have people coming in from other cities supporting all sorts of things, YIMBY Action, Save the Elephant Seals in New Zealand, etc. If they're being paid to represent a group, I think that that's a lot different than if you had someone that was a regular resident who maybe just had their own private feelings about something. But if you're getting paid to represent a company, I think it's important that the public knows that. Especially this has come up with the Zoom issues, for the last year and a half. We don't know where people are calling in from, and we don't know if they're being paid to promote certain issues. So I think this is a very, very good thing to do. Yes, it's going to be difficult, but then again, the last year and a half has been difficult. Zoom is difficult. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. I'll bring it back up to council at this point. Again, the recommended action was read by our city clerk as adoption of resolution number 21-057 with details therein and also in our council agenda. Would anyone like to move the item? Councilmember Moore.
So moved.
Would anyone like to second item number 30? I'll go ahead and second item number 30. And so any care for discussion? Councilmember Way, you're here.
Oh, sorry, no.
Oh, okay. Let's go ahead and conduct a roll call vote, please, Madam City Clerk.
Councilmember Moore,
Aye.
Councilmember Way,
Aye.
Councilmember Willie,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Chow,
Aye.
Mayor Paul.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Great, thank you very much. We are now on to the last substantive item on our agenda. That is item number 31 under ordinances and action items. The subject is to consider designation of a residential preferential parking or RPP zone on Sarah Street from Canyon Way to the end. And I believe that we have a member of our staff, David Stillman, to provide an update. Madam City Manager, would you like to introduce our staff member?
Yeah, and due to the time, I'll try and summarize, and then I know David has a presentation should council have further interest in the details. So this is an area near Rancho San Antonio, where lots of the neighborhoods have permitted parking due to the park being so popular. And this is just another street that is looking for preferential parking for its residents in that same area. And they did it by petition. So I open it to David or council and ask if you want to see his presentation or if you'd like to go straight to questions.
Well, let's, observing the time, let's go to questions. If there are references to the presentation that would be useful to the questions of staff, please feel free to provide that. Councilmember Willie.
I think it would be helpful if there is a map showing the location of San Antonio relative to the street.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Willie. And so, David, could you put up, I assume in your presentation you have a slide where you have an aerial view of the map of the street area in the context.
Yes, yeah, that's correct, Mayor Paul. Good evening, Council. David Silman, Transportation Manager. I'll share my screen and I can show you a map of the area. I will go through, I only had 4 slides here, if everybody can see my screen. Here is an aerial view showing the location. The street in red here is Sarah Street. This is the cul-de-sac. It's got 11 homes. This is the street that has requested the permit parking on weekends, Sundays, Saturdays, Sundays, and holidays from 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. The street in blue here, Canyon Oak, this street over here, Hammond Way, these streets already have permit parking from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. on Saturdays, Sundays, and holidays. They've had that in place since about 2016. As a result of overflow parking from Rancho San Antonio Park, which is located over in this area with a pedestrian access path that leads to the neighborhood over here, people are parking on Sarah Street during those busy times in order to be able to access the park. So the residents have requested permit parking in place in order to prohibit park users from parking on their streets during those busy times.
Great. So Saturdays, Sundays, and holidays between 6 a.m. and 2 p.m.
Yes.
Okay, great. Any further questions, Councilmember Willie?
Yeah, just one other. So, of course, we want as much undeveloped park area as possible, but you know, do you know that the San Antonio Park, why they wouldn't add sufficient parking? A little bit more. They already have some parking to alleviate this impact on the residents. I mean, it'd sure be nice to at least know that. Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Sure, and we have ongoing relationship with the district and discussions about this and other things, and it's a balance that they are trying to find between providing enough parking for the demand, as well as discouraging overuse of the park. They're already very crowded during those times, and they feel justifiably so that adding to the parking area in addition to taking away valuable open space would just further encourage the congestion that they see there during those busy times.
Right, and I'll add to that. I did have a conversation not too long ago with a member of the board of directors of Mid-Penn, and one of the possible solutions might be something. I mean, we could perhaps partner with one of the operators of a relatively nearby parking lot, such as FUHSD in Homestead or something, and perhaps run a shuttle, back and forth between Rancho San Antonio and one of these, relatively nearby parking lots during the busy times. And so that's a potential point of synergy and cooperation between our jurisdiction and theirs as well. But point taken. They do have a very popular product, so to speak, that they operate there. It's an ongoing discussion for sure. Thanks for the question, Councilmember Woolley. Let's go on to Councilmember Moore.
Great, thank you. And to that point, Manager Stillman, I had also spoken to someone from Rancho San Antonio about the park, and it is balancing the fact that it is a nature preserve, and that you have so many people trying to access it. A suggestion that I had was to build another trail that was closer to where the parking areas were, so that, because that's a heavily impacted area, that maybe in the future they could do that, so that the places that are further back away, where you're going to encounter wildlife more often, remain undisturbed. But looking at these hours of operation, I'm just kind of curious. I can totally understand the 6 a.m., but why did the residents on this street want it to end at 2 instead of 4, like the other streets?
Thank you for the question, Councilmember Moore. The residents on this street felt that extending the permit parking hours to 4 p.m. would create an undue burden on themselves and their neighbors, because they tend to have a lot of barbecues, birthday parties, that sort of thing in the afternoons on the weekends, and that extending the permit parking into that time would be an added inconvenience for them. And they also felt that, based on their observations of the parking issues out there, the worst times for the parking encroachment tended to be in the early and mid mornings on the weekends. And once the mid-afternoon rolled around, the parking demand was a lot lighter. So they did not feel it was necessary to extend the permit parking hours to 4 p.m. as they have on the adjacent streets.
Okay, great. And they're all pretty much in agreement on these hours, and so it's.
Yes, in fact, there were two petitions circulated. The first one had the original, or the 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. hour, and they had 8 out of the 11 signed that one. Then the neighbors discussed among themselves and came to a consensus that they preferred the 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. time slot. A petition that was circulated with those hours came back signed unanimously by the entire street.
Okay, that's good to hear. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Councilmember Moore. Councilmember White.
Yeah, just a quick question, actually, is to follow up with Councilmember Moore's question. I did notice the time difference. I think the afternoon 2 p.m. makes sense, but they want a 6 a.m. instead of 7 a.m. You know, I mean, 6, 7, I don't think anybody's going to park there. So I'm okay with passing 6 a.m. to 2 p.m., but I'm just curious, why 6, not 7? It's just so that it's more conforming. People, or the guests, whoever try to park there is not confused.
Yeah, honestly, I haven't been out there at 6 in the morning, but from their observations, they feel that the problem starts very early, and they anecdotally have told me that they've seen lines of cars extending all the way out on Cristo Rey to Foothill before the park opens, people waiting to get into the parking lot. And so based on what they've seen, they feel that the problem does start that early.
Okay.
Yeah, as a
I live there, so yeah.
The sun does come out pretty early in the summer. You can actually see the dawn before 5 o'clock these days.
Not bad, considering it's $12 worth of phone and $30 worth of speaker dryers.
Okay, so Councilmember Moore.
I just want to say I've been a user of that park for, gosh, I think 25 years. And what happened to my knowledge is that Runner's World ran a story on it being one of the great places to run. And ever since then, this was many years ago, everybody and their brother showed up to go run there, and it's been super crowded. And I gave up on even trying to go there on the weekends unless you go very late. Just a plug for the park. If you get there right before closing and you get in there, you can hear the great horned owls out there. They start making noise, and it's really awesome. But yeah, I feel for the neighbors and the impacts that they're having. It's a great park, though. Thank you for working with them.
Okay, great. We'll go on to our members of the public. I don't see any hands raised from our public at this point. And so let's give a moment to our members of the public if anyone would like to speak on item number 31. I still don't see any hands raised. I'll move back to our council, and would anyone like to move the recommended action? And that is conducting the first reading of ordinance number 21-2228, which will have our city clerk read if anyone would like to move this item. Councilmember White, would you like to move the item?
Yes, I move that ordinance number 21-2228 be read by title only, and that the city clerk's reading constitute the first reading thereof. I further move that ordinance number 21-2228 is exempt from CCOF.
Excellent. Thank you, Councilmember White. Councilmember Willie, would you like to second Councilmember White's motion?
Yes, I second it.
Very good. I don't see further hands raised at this point, and so Madam City Clerk, would you please conduct the first reading of ordinance number 21-2228?
This is the first reading of ordinance number 21-2228, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Cupertino designating a residential preferential parking zone on Sarah Street from Canyon Oak Way to the end on Saturdays, Sundays, and holidays between the hours of 6 a.m. and 2 p.m.
Very good. I don't see any further hands raised at this point. It seems like we got our questions and comments wrapped up in one. And so, Madam City Clerk, if you would please conduct a roll call vote on this item.
Councilmember Moore?
Aye.
Councilmember Way?
Aye.
Councilmember Willie?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Chow?
Aye.
Mayor Paul?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, congratulations. You know, I didn't think we'd get done before midnight about 4 items ago, but here we are 10 minutes before. We are done with oral communications. We have council and staff comments and agenda items. Do we have those comments and agenda items at this point? I see Councilmember Moore, your hand is raised. Councilmember Moore.
Okay, I'll make it really quick. first, I think we did great tonight. So much work that we got through, and wow, it was actually quite monumental between the manager and the interim manager. And okay, so my future agenda items, we have an objective standards kind of review going through the process, as far as I know, to come up with objective standards. And I would like to, in that, to have a consideration of the shadow study. And I've mentioned this a couple times because Berkeley's is really well done, very clear. And personally, I would just read it over, bring it to council, review it, and if you like it, then we adopt it. But when we looked at the shadow study that we had in the homestead project, that we don't have a codified or a standard, to my knowledge, for how the shadow studies are done. For instance, years ago, there were shadow studies shown for the hills at Valco. And that's what first got me interested in how these shadow studies are done. And possibly there's a way that we could have some objective standards around that with how much shading or lack of sunlight a person's backyard would end up having, where it becomes something that's not according to our regulations. So if anyone is interested in that, I would like to add that to our objective standards.
Okay, would anyone like to second that as an item for future consideration? I see Vice Mayor Chow, your hand is up, and so is Councilmember Willies. Vice Mayor Chow, did you want to second that as a future consideration? Or are you waiting in line to?
Yeah, I have items to talk about. Yeah, I second that.
Councilmember Woolley, were you raising your hand in order to express support for Councilmember Moore's request?
True.
I'm sorry, one more time?
True, yes, it was just to be a second to that.
Oh, well, noted. Okay, and so Vice Mayor Chow, we're on to you for comments or future agenda items.
Okay. So I think I mentioned the potential rainbow stripe in front of the Anza that I hope we can consider at some time. And then and I mentioned in the earlier comment area that we need a follow-up study for the housing survey, because we only cover the 7 sites in Cupertino, but for the housing element, we need the wider consideration. So the housing subcommittee would like the council to give us more time and funding to do a follow-up site selection, and also a web page, so that people can submit potential sites to help us identify more. I think I shared a list of many sites could be considered earlier. So do I have second for these two, I guess?
Okay, so your first request is a rainbow stripe in front of Deanza. Is that Boulevard or College you're referring to?
The College. I'm thinking of a crosswalk between Deanza and Westport.
Rainbow crosswalk, okay. I see.
Not a rainbow crosswalk, but just a stripe. Yeah.
Okay, well, all right, a strip of, okay, similar to the one that we have in Stevens Creek Boulevard. Okay, so I see hands raised from council members Willie and Moore. Councilmember Willie, did you want to support that?
So I'll take the second one, support the second one, where, you know, Vice Mayor and I are on the subcommittee for the housing survey, and so we want to increase the funds and the staff assistance. And so we don't have actual numbers yet, but if we can get an agenda item so that we can add those funds and staff time. So I'm the second.
I'm sorry, let me briefly refer this to the city manager. So we have the housing survey now. Presumably the information is going to come back to council in some sort of some sort of future agenda item. Isn't that correct?
The information, you mean the answers or the responses to the survey, the data?
That's correct. The results.
Yes. Yeah, I think what the subcommittee is asking, or part of the subcommittee is asking for, is some sort of follow-up portion to the project that would add funding and staff time for identifying housing sites.
Right. So what I'm asking is it something that we could do when the results come back to council and the public?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
We could wrap that in one item potentially.
Yes, you could.
Well, I think our subcommittee would like to not just leave it out that at some future time. We would like to get the added staff time and funding, you know, and it would also include a follow-up survey, you know, that would be more detailed in several aspects. You know, we were really limited on, you know, what we could include in a maximum of 20 questions. Now that we've got so much, over 500 responses so far, and we're only not even halfway through the month, and now with that many of the residents now up to speed on this, now we can go the next step and ask them more detailed questions about where they would want, which Vice Mayor said, here's a bunch of places, but we need to put that into a follow-up survey.
For example, we didn't include Bob Road.
Could we keep this to just a short discussion about whether to put that on a future agenda? I think they're looking for a second right now.
So there already is a second. Chow and Willie.
Yep.
Okay, great.
When does the current survey end?
June 30.
June 30th. You know, we could try to look at July 20th. I can't make any promises as to what the availability is, but we'll see if we can put it on the agenda in July, as it were, at the moment. So we'll take a look at it. All right, and as you know,
So there's one more item. I think when we interviewed the city attorney, we learned at least 2 other cities allow public hearings before 5G sales are approved on public meetings. I think we might need to consider that because we keep getting residents complain that they couldn't even get face-to-face communication on the site that's right in front of their house. So I hope when it comes back, we have considered the possibility of having public meeting between the sale provider and staff and the city and the residents.
let me go back to our city manager. When is 5G anticipated to come back to council at this point? I know that.
Yeah, we're working on the ordinance piece and finishing up the Q&As that council posed, and so I'll say it in 2 parts. I think we're going to try and get the Q&As back to council shortly, and I don't know when a 5G a follow-up study session would be, or a session would be scheduled, except for July 20 or sometime thereabouts.
So you're working on ordinance. Is the first reading on the ordinance expected on July 20th or sometime after that?
I can't answer that question. Someone on, I maybe have to get back to council on that.
Okay, because
I think it's closer to August. My office is working on that.
Okay.
Yeah, the thing is, sometimes they just need a sympathetic set of ears to explain things, rather than just through email very cold, and then sometimes that might help. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, let's go on. We're nearing the end of our time here. Let me go to Councilmember Moore. Actually, we're going back to you because you had an opportunity. Did you want to speak on
Well, yes, it had to do with the vice mayor's request for the rainbow stripe. I didn't hear a second. I was wondering if Manager Deb, if you have any recollection of the second round of striping that went in at Main Street. Any idea what that maybe cost? And I'm going to assume we contracted out for that.
The current striping?
Yes. Yeah, the first one, like that funky tape that peeled up, and then they did it again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was you're asking for the second cost, so the cost of the stuff that stuck?
Yes, yes, roughly, yeah.
Roger, do you have an estimate for that? Off the top of your head?
I do. It was about 25.
I think 25,000. I'm going with that.
No, 2,500, and city staff did the installation.
Wow. Okay. So I'm seconding the vice mayor's request for that stripe at Danza. I think that's a great location, having them balanced on both sides of town. I think that's very nice.
Okay. Well, we'll see whether we can get it to you sooner rather than later. All right. Well, I'm going to have to go ahead and close this out unless somebody has a really brief item.
I have one question, Mayor Paul. I see that Jennifer Griffin has her hand raised. I don't know what the policy is for having comments on this item.
She unraised her hand.
Oh. Okay. All right. There. Thank you.
That was the answer.
It's not an agendized item, and I think given the broad-ranging nature of it, it's very difficult for me to justify this as opposed to oral communications. But advised in the future, if there's time remaining, we'll go ahead and entertain that. So thank you very much. We're officially at midnight, and I believe that some significant things happen from our city's perspective as well. The lifting of a mask order to become consistent with the state and federal guidelines. Thank you very much. This has been a very significant meeting, has been said earlier this evening, and we will see you at the next regularly scheduled meeting on July 20th. Thanks very much. We're effectively adjourned for a bit of a summer break, and well-deserved. Hope everyone has a wonderful 4th of July. We'll see you on the 20th.
Happy